...2015 was a great year for games and gamers alike. However, every year, there are games that are bad, boring, or just flat out disappointing. Hey Shackers, Greg here, and this week I'm going over the top 10 disappointing games of 2015. Now, I kind of debated to make this list the top 10 worst games of 2015. However, I think there were far more games that weren't necessarily bad, but just rather an overall letdown than what we were all expecting. So if a game's on this list, I stress that it doesn't mean it was a bad game, just kind of a letdown. After all, these lists are subjective, so relax and enjoy. These are the top 10 disappointing games of 2015.
Merry Christmas! Dinner was full!
EA Sports is the only publisher allowed to make NFL games, and they have to make one every year. Things are bound to go wrong. Madden 2016 was riddled with bugs and some odd design choices. And although it may look slightly better each year, the amount of additions just isn't enough to warrant a $60 purchase. However, NFL fans have no other option to play football games other than EA and the Madden franchise. I know it may be hard, guys, but you need to stop buying Madden games every year. EA won't learn otherwise.
Put my life in your hands. I gave you my trust, and I believe.
The Rock Band games were great fun years ago. However, how can you improve on a formula that at its core is fairly basic? Well, considering that this game was almost identical to past Rock Band games, and even though the past DLC could be transferred, and you could even use your old plastic instruments in the newer versions, but there was nothing really new to improve on. Begging the question, why buy it? The game didn't sell as well as Harmonix would have hoped. I personally would have liked to see the option to play songs by inserting a CD or importing an MP3 into your Xbox. But then they wouldn't be able to charge you $1.99 for a downloadable Rock Band song. You know, in all honesty, Guitar Hero Live made more of a leap forward than Rock Band 4 did.
We all fight for something.
The MOBA genre is starting to become very overpopulated, meaning in order for your MOBA to stand out, it needs to be different. Infinite Crisis had no new ideas or mechanics. It was basically League of Legends reskinned with DC heroes and villains. And as a huge DC fan, I enjoyed seeing Batman and Superman fight it out in a lane. But the game didn't take any risk with the MOBA formula. Sadly, 2 months after the game's initial release, it was told it was going to be shut down in August, making the game a complete failure. If only WB Games had spent the same amount of money on the development process as they did the esports and marketing, it may have stood a chance. The fourth and supposedly final game in the Batman Arkham series, I enjoyed the game's story, again being a huge DC buff, especially with Tim Drake, Robin, and Jason Todd. However, PC gamers were treated to a horrendous port. Lagging frame rates and game-crashing bugs made the game a nightmare to try to play through on the PC. PC gamers would have to wait months to get a patch that allowed them to enjoy Batman Arkham Knight the way console gamers got to on release day. And it's this terrible PC release that nets Batman Arkham Knight on this list.
Someone pinned down! Help me out here!
With the promise of the ultimate cops and robbers experience, EA set out to make a new Battlefield game. Now to be fair, EA did a decent job on the interesting take of the cop drama in the single-player campaign. However, the lack of variety, weapons, and multiplayer modes was inexcusable, especially for a full-priced retail game at $59.99. It offered far less value compared to its Battlefield 4 counterpart, and gamers saw right through EA's greedy hands, and sales quickly dropped after the game's initial release.
Whoop, whoop. It's not in the game! Whoop, whoop. It's missing in the game! Fucking EA, man. Shit.
think a game that featured a 100-foot tall lizard that beats the crap out of other huge monstrosities would be fun. However, it wasn't the battle royale we had all hoped for. Clunky controls and a barely functioning fighting system were enough to have gamers cry foul to the gigantic, famous Japan-destroying monster.
Sentinel 5, requesting an immediate sonar payload drop.
Golden deployment in 3, 2.
I, Nikola Tesla, am but a mere instrument in this time.
Single-player games are a lot less common than they were 10 years ago. However, The Order 1886 looked fantastic, but clocking in at a mere 5 to 6 hours to complete with little or no incentive to replay the story through again was disappointing. I've talked about the value of games before, and sadly, 1886 was not worth the AAA price tag people paid for it at launch.
Who answer not to our laws.
Proof that insane marketing budgets mean nothing. The game just isn't fun. Although Evolve looked promising in terms of new IP with its unique 4v1 gameplay, it also seemed original and fresh in a world of repeating sequels and prequels. However, the game itself was tedious, with long wait queues, repetitive boring gameplay, and horrid matchmaking that placed you in games with 3 artificially controlled teammates after a 20-minute wait queue. The overall game just wasn't interesting to play, and it didn't help the game's cause that the community was greatly decreasing over time as well. It wasn't the epic esports title everyone had hoped for. In fact, it's not even that popular on Twitch anymore. It was sad to see the game flop in a matter of weeks, with a disappearing user base, DLC being promoted relentlessly, and the esports crowd leaving it out to dry. Evolve seemed like a good idea on paper, but in reality, it just didn't work well.
You ready?
I'm not sure what anyone was thinking when developing Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5. To be honest, I really didn't even realize they made a 3 or 4 in the series, but sadly, this is probably the end for the franchise. The game was riddled with bugs and was barely playable. Skating is so 2006 anyway. The fad of this new Star Wars film coming out in 2015 has paved the way for ridiculous marketing campaigns featuring the famous franchise, from car commercials to toys to terrible mobile games. But certainly, EA's Star Wars Battlefront game wouldn't fall victim to this, right? Well, on November 10th, the game was released, and although it looked phenomenal from a graphics standpoint, the gameplay was painfully average and surprisingly shallow.
Oh, but I forgot, it's not Battlefront, it's Battlefront EA. Star Wars Battlefront EA. It says right there, EA. Great.
From the lack of classes, modes, and heroes, everything gameplay-wise just felt cheap. And with the $50 DLC being promoted to death the day the game came out, just managed to cheapen the overall experience.
Halo 5 and Black Ops 3 offer so much more content for the price.
How could a game released in 2015 have less gameplay, modes, and heroes than its predecessor, Battlefront 2, that came out over 10 years ago? It's so bad, EA had to lower the price to $39.99, not even 3 weeks after its launch, to help the bombardment of criticisms the game was receiving for being so basic. Look, I'm sorry, but everything about Star Wars Battlefront EA was mediocre, which is something that should never be said about a 20v20 online Star Wars game. What game did you guys find disappointing in 2015? Let us know in the comments below. And for more videos like this and everything else gaming related, you're already in the right place. You're on Shacknews.com.
Oh, but I forgot, it's not Battlefront, it's Battlefront EA. Star Wars Battlefront EA. It says right there, EA. Great.